Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, The Future of Digital is Human, How Customer Experience is Driving the Evolution of Technology. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up the media business here at ERPA AI and our sister organization, Digital Enterprise Institute. And thanks for joining us for really what's going to be a great conversation about the intersection of two things that we are preaching more and more to our members. One is the human factor in all this automation and AI talk, and the other is based on feedback from our members. Less of a conversation around just technology and tools, but more about the results and the expectations of what this stuff can really do. So we've got two great veterans of the customer experience space here today for you, one of which is with our sponsor for this session. So thanks to the team at Conduent for putting this on today. Couple of housekeeping items. We will be having a Q&A session towards the end of today's session, but feel free to send in questions throughout as you think of them, and we can start kind of queuing them up throughout the session. There's a Q&A chat box, if you will, in your GoToWebinar panel on the side there, so feel free to send questions in throughout. And we are recording today's session, so don't get too caught up in having to take notes or anything like that. Enjoy the session, and we'll send you the recording afterwards. Very briefly, for those who haven't attended an ERPA webinar before, we are a professional association, ERPA AI, focused on all things automation, AI, and cognitive. Our goal is really to be a resource for you, anybody who's in this industry, whether you're on the buy side, the sell side, or somewhere in between. And we have a variety of resources like webinars, but also other content, events, networking, and advice that we can provide to you regardless of where you are in the journey. So if there's anything we can ever do to help, please reach out to us. And if we don't have the answer, we usually know the person who does. So we can help get you connected. So let me introduce today's speakers. As I mentioned, two industry veterans. Anish Chopra, the first U.S. CTO, former U.S. CTO, and Erica Ong, she's the VP of Customer Experience Management Solutions at Conduent. Let me first give Anish an opportunity to say hello and maybe a little bit of your background for our audience today, Anish.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I look forward to this discussion. You know, there's a lot of engineering and technology work that needs to get done to modernize the economy. The application layer, the places where this interfaces with individuals, that's where I was tasked in my role as CTO. So thanks for that introduction. We're going to be talking a lot about, how do we use this information to help people, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Looking forward to it. And I know you'll be talking a little bit more on the public sector side, which is always intriguing to me. So I already have some questions for you, but I'll let you give your talk first. And Erica, how about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And I love the title of this webinar, and you spoke to it in your opening remarks about why are we doing all this, right? And ultimately, it is outcome-based and how we're striving to ultimately improve the human experience through the implementation of technology. As Dan mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience Management Solutions for Conduent. And for those of you not familiar with Conduent, we are a global provider of critical services and solutions in both the public and private sector. And our mission is to create those exceptional outcomes for our clients and the millions upon millions of our clients' customers in order to improve their experience.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Erica. Thanks for being here. And again, thanks to your team for helping support this and a lot of the things we do throughout the year. So Anish, let me hand it off to you and we can get this thing started.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. And actually, that segue is actually a useful one. And maybe I probably should have said a bit more in the introduction to set the stage here. But the country in 2009, began to grapple with whether or not we were harnessing the full power and potential of technology, data, and innovation. I had been serving as Virginia's a Secretary of Technology, which was a cabinet position created to sort of organize at the state level. And a few other states had followed suit, but it was President Obama's election and decision to create a role that would report directly to the president, explicitly around strategies to unlock all of this capability in advance of a number of public policies. And it's interesting to note, for those of you on the line that have backgrounds in technology, this government's IT itself did not report to me. So this was a function where we had a CIO. One of my best friends actually served in that role. And the US government now approaching $100 billion of IT spend. But the premise was that we should have in the president's direct orbit, direct report, someone that could help bridge the divide between the capability of technology and the advancement of public policy. So to kind of bring that concept home, I thought I'd share a little bit of kind of a milestone moment about a year into the role. President Obama had invited CEOs from all over the economy, from the technology leaders that we know today, from Steve Ballmer at the time was CEO of Microsoft, to a whole litany of industries, Mickey Drexler on the retailing side, entertainment, and all the rest. We tapped these leaders to come in and advise us on a number of critical functions in management. One obviously being how they were running more effective and efficient operations, but right behind sort of operational gaps was the issue of customer service, customer experience, and how we might apply the lessons learned from the private sector in the public sector. Fast forward, President Obama unveiled a management agenda, and President Trump, this is one of those areas that's bipartisan, built on that progress. And today, as an overarching requirement in the government, there actually are some explicit goals to improve customer experience for the agencies and departments that have direct communication with individuals. And so now you can see roughly on the screen, if you squint, sample questions that are mandatory for government service delivery organizations to ensure that we get feedback from the American people on satisfaction, on the quality of the interaction, and the like. This is a sea change in culture, but it's powered by technology. And so we'll go into that a bit more as we go. One of the interesting areas early in the Obama administration was the power of customer experience improvement in the wake of political discord. So one of the early priorities for President Obama was to reform the immigration system. No need to get into that on this call. As you can imagine, there was not a lot of bipartisan consensus. And I remember a day in June, early 2009, President Obama was meeting with Senator McCain, and there was hope that they might reach some agreement about immigration policy. And when it was clear that that was not going to happen, the team scrambled to say, what might we do together that is bipartisan and is an area that we can make progress? And it turned out that customer experience was an area that was screaming for improvement. If you asked any loved one or neighbor or family friend or whomever, what was it like for you to interact with the immigration department in terms of understanding, whether you're getting your papers or whether you need to do anything? It was mostly a scary black box, lawyer laden experience. You would call and say, any news? Is my application going anywhere? And long story short, it was maybe a miserable experience, to be polite. We, coming out of that June meeting, because we were scrambling, we spoke with President Obama, and he said, I'm going to issue a challenge. I'm going to say at the end of my discussions with Senator McCain that in 90 days, we're going to strengthen the customer experience. And I bring that up in this context because, in fact, that is what we did. The first thing we did was ask ourselves the question, what could we do to take the opaque nature of the service and make it transparent? We asked questions internally. what happens to an application when we get it. And we learned that there are dozens of steps and hundreds of departments and staff that could touch your case application, from national security interests to other mundane tasks. And so we said, can't we just organize all of this and present back to the American people a simple summary of what's the status of their application? And oh, by the way, if we move it from status 1 to status 2, could we like push the notification instead of making people call us, or worse, have their lawyers call us? And so that led to the screen that you see in front of you, My Case Status service that we launched within 90 days, both in Spanish and in English, that allows you to see where you are in the queue, to understand whether you're the bottleneck or the government's the bottleneck. And then at the bottom, you can see this processing time graphic. We knew that different offices within the service, the Northeast, the Southeast, the Northwest, the Southwest, it depended on the vagaries of the local agency whether or not your application was completed, in a timely manner or in a more delayed manner. So we said, we're going to disclose the average turnaround time by department and tell you personally where you stand in the queue. And like Burger King, allow you to have it your way, where individuals could submit their cell phone number and take an email or a text about the update. What was amazing about this process is that we went from last place on customer satisfaction for Spanish speakers, or for the Hispanic community in general, and we moved it to the top performing digital service of those in the Hispanic community. And all of this by turning the sort of transparency knob from closed to open. And I want to suggest to you that doing this did not require a significant technical investment. It was more cultural than it was technical. So what I thought I might share is, while there are technologies that enable improvements in customer experience, that ultimately for them to have an impact, they need to be connected to a culture and organization that's committed to doing right by their constituencies, whether it be, in this case, citizens and the American people, or customers at your organization. I want to highlight 3 in this part of the webinar, and then pass it to Erica, and then have a dialogue with all of you about implications. The first is that open data does facilitate a marketplace of front doors. So yes, we can improve the website at the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services, but more to the point, if we opened up the underlying information, people could incorporate that same knowledge maybe on a different website, a media property, or someone or a place that is trusted by the constituents. Increasingly, that is technical in nature, and that's point number 2. Open standards for data access. So it's one thing to open up the information about wait times and the like, and have that be distributed across the country as an open data set. It's another to say, I've got an app that I trust. I don't want to log into the My USCIS website. I want to use an app that I trust. Can I get access to the underlying data and connect it to the app I trust? So the second enabler of improvements in CX is essentially to partner with an application ecosystem. And then last but not least, as we gather up more and more information, and many of you on this call are working in organizations that are mining data for insight, how can we apply the lessons learned? So we're going to spend a few minutes on each of these 3 levers, but I did want to talk about culture because I think it's critical for this to take the technology in the context of an organization to make change. This is a picture of a house in Maryland that was rented by my successor, Todd Park. And the purpose of the rental was to help recover the failed website healthcare.gov. Now, we could review all the history of this in the Q&A if there's a topic, but obviously many of you are aware one of the biggest disasters in digital government was the launch of healthcare.gov in 2013. Well, the team was successful in stitching together the systems and sort of stumbling their way through the finish line, but faced a conundrum at the beginning of the year. Will we continue to patchwork the system that we already have that kind of worked, but didn't really optimize? Are we going to throw it away and start from scratch? Or is there a third option, Team A, Team B? And my successor, Todd, suggested that we build a Team A, Team B culture. Let's rent a house in Maryland, recruit a few engineers, maybe a dozen, and empower them to use internet-based technologies, modern technologies, not enterprise software, to extend and rebuild effectively the core functionality. And let's look at progress made between teams A and B and make judgments by the end of the year as to which piece can work out. A login system that costs nearly $200+ million with a $70 million maintenance cost was rebuilt for $4 million and $1 million maintenance with like 10x the performance improvement. And across the board, it became clear with the culture that 70% of all digital transactions could flow through Team B, the internet crew, without ever having to touch the legacy infrastructure of Team A. So we'll talk about these three enablers in the context of a culture that rewards their use to improve the customer experience. Point number one, open data. In this scenario, I want to point to the recreation.gov site. Many of us might love to visit the great outdoors, Yosemite National Park. Many of you may not know that we've centralized the ticketing and the availability experience as a federal website that is recreation.gov. Now, in the past, the only way to get access to the information about availability is to literally visit recreation.gov. And one concept of customer experience improvement would have been to make that website even better. The good news is the government team in charge made the decision to make that underlying data open. And that was seen as a positive, not a negative on customer experience. So now you can visit third-party websites, like you can see a screenshot from a site called HipCamp that now can ingest all of the same content from recreation.gov, but layer on top of it personalization, social, and other factors that may be harder for a government website to manage. And this marketplace of front doors strengthens the ability for the American people to find a campground that's right for them without saying we have to put all of our eggs in a single website basket. Fund marketing and outreach and education and personalization all on one site. Now we can have a litany of folks doing it, and that is powered by technology in the open data space. The second area, and this sort of cuts from government, but more broadly speaking into insurance, is the issue of personalization and open APIs. So a little bit of context for those of you who suffer this problem. Every year we all make insurance decisions. Many of us have few options, and so we sort of have to make, the worst or the best of whatever we can get. But in the public sector, we have the opposite problem. We have a plethora of options. In fact, for prescription drug plans for senior citizens, the average senior might have 70+ plans available for choice. Now, the problem is the complexity of health insurance is such that, you could sort by the premium, and you can see a screenshot from a company called Humana, whom I work with, and you can see the plans that they offered back in 2019. You can see that there's a very expensive product at the bottom, the Humana Enhanced PDP, in contrast with the Walmart or the preferred options that are considerably cheaper. So the natural inclination might be just to click the buy button on the cheap product and move on. The problem is that so much of the cost of a prescription drug plan is knowing the drugs you're on and whether those drugs are on or off a formulary. And there's a great deal of complexity in figuring out the estimated out-of-pocket cost based on whether you're a, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so many years ago, health insurance websites began personalizing. And they built features called Estimate Your Drug Cost. And in the past, you could click that icon, and using technology, they would say, please manually enter the drugs that you're on, and we can run it through our calculator on the back end, and we can give you a second cut of the options on the shopping menu to sort by the estimated out-of-pocket cost based on the drugs you take and the conditions you have relative to just the premium. Economists believe the average senior spends $500 a year more than they should on account of the formulary gaps. That is to say, they may have bought a cheaper plan, but they ended up paying more out of pocket because of the drugs they were on were off the formulary. So that $500 per person economic problem, the idea was that these services like estimate your drug cost could really make some headway. The problem is that it's really annoying to manually enter all the drugs that you're taking if you're a senior on a chronic condition with lots of medications. So the most frequent button pushed in the version 1 of these shopping experiences was skip this step. And so even though the functionality of personalization was there, the reality of its use was not. Enter open APIs. In August of 2018, CMS, the website mymedicare.gov, provided access to all the medications history going back 4 years, in addition to the rest of your claims history, and decided in August of last year to make that data feed available via APIs to an application you trust. CMS opened the door and welcomed third-party app developers, and Humana was first in line. Humana went live in open enrollment back in 2019 with about 10 days left, and they offered this feature. Do you trust us to connect your records from mymedicare.gov so we can personalize your shopping estimates? 10,000 people hit the permission button in the first 10 days. And while we haven't seen published statistics, what I can tell you, having worked on the project, is double-digit conversion rate improvement on shoppers who personalize the experience by blue button relative to those who had to manually enter or skip this step. APIs allow for that personalization to take place on and off the balance sheet of the data holder. Last but certainly not least, the importance of big data and big data analytics. Many of you might remember, by the way, this year's Super Bowl ad by Google was particularly touching. A year ago, 2019, the Super Bowl that Google funded was about veteran job search. And the idea was that a veteran should be able to manually enter their unique, what's called an MOC code, and have that run through the algorithms in Google search to find job listings that map closely to their job description in the government or in the military. Powering this ad is an open data standard that allows for this big data opportunity. Back in 2010, 2011, the industry search engines and stakeholders said, you know what, let's standardize how job postings are published on the internet and make them accessible for big data analytics applications to harvest and use. LinkedIn and many other institutions voluntarily joined the open data movement for jobs. And you could see the results. A research study that we helped organize found that if you mined all the job postings that were flagged open and you drew from that a linkage or a matching engine to say, here are the underlying skills that are in demand, match them against a veteran's underlying skill set powered by the skills they learned in the government. If we had a skills-based matching experience, not a keyword search-based matching experience, we would have a dramatically better fit. In fact, for technology job postings in the state of Virginia, 28% of those from employers who wanted to hire veterans were deemed entry level. And at that moment in time, all of the unemployed veterans filing unemployment benefits could have qualified as tech trainable to enroll in those tech jobs. Today's version 1 of job matching would have missed the match, but this next generation big data powered matching engine fueled by open data would have connected the two. And that leads us to this final statement, and I hand off to Erica, an opportunity to modernize the economy, make more human the experience powered by these 3 fundamental technologies. Thank you very much for your time. And Erica, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Anish. And it's, you know what, it's refreshing to know that there's still some bipartisan issues that we can all work on together. For my portion of this program, I'm going to be generally referring to the end user as the customer, but really it's meant to be a ubiquitous term that could refer to any end user. It could be an employee, a citizen, a patient, a traveler, or any consumer. And, you know, when I first got into this business, it was back in the 90s, and it was all about what technology could do for us, meaning from the business side of things. We were in the throes of the dot-com boom, and we were working on incorporating all kinds of technology in the contact center and customer experience space. We were rolling out automatic call distributors, virtual call routing, and interactive voice response solutions, or IVRs. Quickly, website usage was increasing, and this was even prior to the dawn of smartphones and apps, text, and social media. However, the focus was typically on how technology could cut costs and improve security and consistency. And honestly, through many mistakes, what we quickly realized is that it's not technology that's driving changes. We're at the point today where we can generally get technology to do what we want. It's really the end user or the customer that drives the change. If a process is not intuitive, if it's too complicated, if it has too many friction points, a customer won't use it. Think about the immigration example that Anish just gave. And they will go somewhere else where the experience is more seamless. You know, and kind of similar to what Anish was just talking about, where often instead of redesigning an ineffective process, a patchwork fix is put on top of it, like a Band-Aid, and money and resources are thrown at it. This ultimately doesn't solve the problem. Today, we're at an all-time high of parity between goods and services that we can get on the market. That means companies and programs need to differentiate through experience. Ultimately, it's the customer experience that drives growth in market share and adoption. Companies that can't create an effortless experience for their customers risk losing them to the competition. Or for government or other industries and programs where there's not a competing product or service, they run the risk of failing to launch because they don't get the adoption required or fail to reach their target demographic. So now that it's 2020 and we are living in this incredibly disruptive time as it relates to technology, how we socialize, how we buy products and services, it's all changing. How do we overcome these challenges? And today I'm going to focus on 5 essentials for driving a positive customer experience. The first one is self-service. People want to get what they want when they want it. They don't want to be constricted by hours of operation, cumbersome steps to get information online or through an app. Customers expect to be able to engage with companies just like they do with their friends and family, through their phone, via text or messaging apps, and they want immediate feedback. Think about ordering fast food and today's genre of fast casual food. In fact, the whole concept of fast food was built around the experience. There's a market for the convenience and speed of getting a meal or a drink. That said, even just a few years ago, it still took going to the restaurant, waiting in line to place your order, and then waiting to pick up your food. Now, today, if you look at companies like McDonald's or Sweetgreen, they're changing the business model. And they're investing huge dollars in technology, in self-service kiosks, in their restaurants, and in their ordering apps, and even incent people to order from their phones through their apps while in line. As a customer, you get benefits from this. You can order and even pre-order your food and have it available when you want. This is changing the business model for these industries. Sweetgreen, as an example, is opening non-storefront kitchens And once the food is prepared, the food orders that came in via the app are delivered to pickup hubs like office buildings across cities. And their app use has grown 70% year over year because they're providing a self-service experience that is easy to use for their customers. Customers benefit from having control and enjoy a frictionless experience. That builds loyalty. It grows your customer base. It creates a consistent experience, and it reduces overhead costs. The second essential, and Anish spoke about this as well, is personalization. And just like engaging with friends and family, customers expect the company knows who they are. If I'm calling my cable company at 8 p.m. on Friday night after trying to stream The Avengers, I'm probably calling about some problem related to that. However, if I call the same company at 9 a.m. the Monday after I received my bill the prior week, then I'm probably calling with a billing question. The more a company can add value to my experience using my personal information, the more info I'm willing to share as a consumer or a citizen. So take, for instance, Starbucks. There's over 30,000 Starbucks on the planet, but each and every one of them know my usual coffee order. They even know my birthday because I was willing to give them that information, because every month of my birthday, I get a free drink. And sometimes I get surprised by discounts and other perks when I'm near one. And again, that builds repeat business and loyalty. The third essential is seamless interaction. The fewer the touch points, the better. I travel a lot for work, and I'm guessing many of you do too. And it was only a couple of years ago when you would arrive tired to a hotel after a long day of travel, where you would have to wait in line to check in and get your room assignment. Now, with most major hotel chains, you can check in online or via the app, often a few days before your arrival, and you get your room assignment the day of. For hotels that have keyless entry systems through the app on your phone, you don't even need to stop at the front desk. You just go straight to your room. The industry has taken a process that was multiple steps on site to a couple of clicks in an app and no process once you arrive. They've redesigned the entire check-in process. And Disney is such a leader in this space. In fact, they invested in developing a whole new form of wearable tech around it. It's the Magic Band. For those of you not familiar, the Magic Band, I think it came out in 2013. And it's a wearable RFID device, and it functions as your park ticket, photo storage, your hotel room key, and it holds something called fast passes, which are reserved time slots in which you are fast-tracked onto a ride without having to wait in the standby line, thus reducing your time spent waiting in line and giving you the ability to customize your day in the park. Well, what's the big downside to Disney to having their park attendees, their customers, wait in line? Experience, yes, but guess what? Guess what you're also not doing if you're waiting in line for a ride? You're not spending money. So Disney wants you freed up to spend money at their restaurants and various retail shops and add-on experiences. And of course, what can you also do with that Magic Band? You link it to your credit card so you can make purchases. The one swipe, your transaction is complete. It's seamless for the customer because you don't need to bring the separate credit card or wallet to the park. And it's a revenue generator for Disney. Augmented reality is a great tool in this space, and it's an area within Conduent we're heavily investing. For instance, we developed an AR tool to use with prescriptions and other medical devices. You know that sheet of paper you get with all the details about the medicine that you get when you pick up your prescription from the pharmacy, and it often ends up in the trash? Well, now all you need to do is hold up your camera over your prescription bottle and you get all that information. In addition to that, you can get real-time answers to questions. You can order a refill and shop for the best price for that refill. AR is particularly useful in this example for self-treatment and care. For instance, how to replace a bandage properly or learn to check your own blood sugar. The outcomes here directly drive better health for patients, and it reduces the hassle and cost of additional doctor's appointments or being readmitted to the hospital. There's great benefits for all. Technology is driving business process acceleration. That's number 4 on the list. Now, we as employees, we also expect an effortless experience when we go into work. When I show up in the office, I don't want to feel like I'm entering the dark ages. I don't want to have to walk down the hall to a traditional file cabinet to get the document I need. I don't want to have to take the time to create my own spreadsheet to get an answer to my question. The easier it is for me to do my job, the more likely I am to do it well and to stay in the role, and that leads to employee retention. We're working with a few clients right now that must track literally tens of thousands of different cell tower equipment and leases. And with the race to 5G, the amount of equipment and therefore leases that need to be executed and tracked is expected to increase tenfold. That means manual management of these contracts is reaching a breaking point. And forget about doing any real analysis on these leases to ensure you're swapping out equipment without penalty and getting the benefit of proper discounts. Technology is accelerating the pace of business. The amount of data being generated is increasing exponentially. And then it becomes a circular effect. With all this data and with customers demanding immediate answers to their questions and completion of their transactions, we have to use technology to meet those demands. Which leads me to, last but not least, predictive analytics. And Anish spoke about this as well, but it all culminates here. How do you provide an experience that is instantaneous, an experience that is intelligent, that's intuitive, that's personalized, that's seamless? Analytics. How do you grow your customer base? How do you grow adoption and create loyalty? Analytics. You know, I was on Instagram not too long ago, and I noticed an ad for a company called Winc, W-I-N-C. And this is a wine subscription company that, based on an initial survey of your preferences, it will customize a selection of wines that they think you will enjoy. Then after trying those wines, you provide feedback. The more feedback, the better they get at predicting your preferences. Now, many things could have struck me about this. Clearly, Instagram's analytics were working and recognized that I would be a prime target for this kind of service. But what really struck me is that they advertised themselves. They literally said this in the ad, that they are the Netflix of wine. Yes, it's a subscription service, but think about how Netflix really differentiates themselves, even from now the abundance of competitive streaming products. They know your viewing habits, and they offer you recommendations based on your preference that keep you coming back for more. Then they analyze their customers' viewing habits at a macro level, and they create content based on their customers' interests. So now other companies are emulating Netflix, not on basis of being a subscription service. Those have been around for a long time, but based on the analytics behind the service that tailors the experience to you. That, for instance, is what our benefits administration tool, Life at Work, does, similar to the example that Anish provided with Humana. It helps with the decision-making process each year during annual enrollment. It takes what it knows of you and your family, along with your healthcare needs, and it will proactively recommend what is needed for coverage and allows you to compare solutions and associated costs. The analysis is all completed for you, and it will predict what you need for the upcoming year, leading to better outcomes. So how do you derive the analytics that get you to create the right experience for your customers, that get you a virtual assistant that not only can answer the customer's questions, but predicts their needs, and gets smarter and better the more you engage with it? How do you use augmented reality to improve the experience? It all starts with the data. But what is critical is how you use the data and implement the right processes and technology to create a better human experience. Customers vote with their pocketbook, so it's critical to get it right. This is how customers and the customer experience is driving the evolution of technology. If you're interested in reading more on this topic, I did write an article that you can find on Conduent.com called The 5 Essentials for Driving a Positive Customer Experience. And you can always feel free to reach out to me directly as well. Thank you. Back to you, Dan.
Erica, thank you. Thank you. That was very helpful. And thank you for sharing, the examples, right? Because sometimes we see these slides and we can't always visualize it. I love your example about the Disney Magic Band. I was actually just in Disney with my family and trying to have a good time and relax, but the business side of me couldn't let go of how perfect and magical the Magic Band is, right? Because it does, as you indicated, kind of really encapsulate all of these things and seamless. And I think one of the conversations that we have with members a lot is, all this stuff costs money, and so how's it going to save costs? But you indicated, as I noticed as well, that it's also, and probably most importantly, a revenue enhancer for them, right? In addition to being able to spend more, you can pre-order your food while you're waiting online, if you are waiting online. I can tell you, I didn't realize how much I was spending because I just kept using that band instead of pulling out my credit card, right? So you don't have that barrier of entry, just like I think the cruise ships found out years ago with their cards. So that's a great example. Thank you. So I have some questions, and I want to open the floor to questions here now as well for the audience. So if you have questions for today's speakers, please go ahead and send them now through that question and answer box, and we'll get through as many as we can. But before we, so go ahead and send those through. And while I'm waiting for those to come through, I have a few questions and for this kind of roundtable session. And so Amir, I guess I'll give Erica a break and maybe start with you. And it was interesting to me to hear it, from the government perspective. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say most people, certainly consumers and constituents, I would say, probably perceive the government as being behind on technology. Do you agree with that? And how do you feel that the government's caught up since you've been, when you were there and since then? Are they kind of caught up to the commercial side of things, or how would you describe the current lay of the land?
Yeah, so it's sort of a tale of two public sectors, which is, if you took a look at the $100 billion of IT spend and sort of asked yourself, would this be the allocation of those resources to reflect a modern cloud first sort of analytic environment, operational environment? What you'd probably say, looking at it, is that the mix of investments are more skewed towards legacy maintenance and operations, maybe more so as a percentage of spend than you'd find at a more nimble sector of the U.S. economy. So there's sort of an obvious statement there about catch up. On the other hand, the U.S. government is among the first to embrace these sort of APIs and open data strategies, which were priorities in both the Trump and Obama administrations, to the point where the insurance companies today that have sensitive health information, really, Medicare is the only website that's up and running where they allow third-party apps to compete on ways that make that customer experience better. And in fact, not only has it led the way, but it is actually regulating. We're in the middle of a big process to regulate all the Medicaid plans, the Medicare Advantage plans, the healthcare.gov, kind of commercial plans. All of those plans are going to play catch up. So you might look at it and say, well, it's far behind, but then you'd look at these sort of capabilities that allow some of the 5 drivers that Erica mentioned, and you'd say, wait, in fact, the government can facilitate others to do that on government-held data, which is actually a leader. So it's a tale of 2 cities, Dan.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense. And I'm wondering, related to that, I'm wondering, if you think about what Erica mentioned around, people kind of rate their experience with their pocketbooks, right? It's not always the same on the government side. So what was behind that initiative, and how do you see kind of the customer or constituent expectations differing from, on the public side versus the commercial side?
Yeah, no, this required leadership, not market forces. So to your point,
right.
There isn't there's a famous economist, I'm going to date myself and forget the author, but the idea of exit as a strategy to exercise your voice, and exit meaning I can take my business elsewhere. So you're going to constantly focus, exactly to your point about competitive pressures. Well, how can I exit the U.S. government from processing my U.S. government immigration?
Right.
Doesn't make sense. So the idea is required leadership to say that we're going to make this a bipartisan priority, and that to simulate the idea of exit, this movement of government APIs would mean that if you don't want to go to recreation.gov to look for the vacation with your family, now you can go to HipCamp and REI and hundreds of sites. So in a sense, it is a government resource, the national park, but we do now have a competitive marketplace of apps to provide for you a more personalized experience. So we've created a market dynamic, even though the underlying asset is public sector. And that doesn't work in all cases, but in the cases where there's a direct-to-service delivery, more and more of them are offering this sort of third-party application option.
Yep. And Erica, how about from your standpoint with the customers you work with? I'm curious as to how you've seen the customer expectations change recently, and also is most of your clients the technology and the change that's happening, is it being driven by their customers, or is it being driven more by the tech and the business needs?
Yeah, I think it really is being driven by the customer. If we go way back, customer experience was generally you'd have to go in and physically talk to a person at a place of business or retail shop, and then ultimately we set up all these big contact centers, and you could call in and you expected an actual person to answer the phone, and that person would be one-stop shop for everything. But ultimately, as organizations grow, that was not sustainable, couldn't be the case. And then I referenced, the interactive voice response, those kind of famous DTMF dial tone, press 1 for this, 2 for that. We kind of got used to, as a customer, just saying, oh, okay, I'm going to dial in to this nameless, faceless piece of technology. I'm going to have to enter my account number twice and remember my password to be validated. And if I don't remember my password, then goodness sake, I don't know what to do after that. And that IVR is not going to recognize, me versus Anish versus anybody else. And that is not a good experience. Maybe that IVR could actually answer the question ultimately. Maybe it's secure, but it was not a good experience. And that's where, through the use of technologies, a lot of my clients have been focused on, how do I actually provide that better personal experience? How do I recognize the difference between Erica texting a company through my app versus Anish calling in over phone and the fact that Anish has already been on the website 5 times, right, trying to self-service and find his own answers, so that we know that, and then actually, if needed, have an educated agent answer the call, equipped with that data and history to be able to resolve whatever the issue is.
Yeah, yeah, and what kind of came to mind for me when you say that is, you know, one of the biggest challenges I hear is one around integration, right? There's organizations out there that are providing, you know, different pieces of customer experience, but in a lot of cases the integration's not there. We've all been on those customer experience chats, right? Where, you know, first you're speaking to something that's automated, that can't help you, and then they hand it off to an agent who really should already know where you are, but you kind of start all over, and then you're 25 minutes in, and then they tell you, oh, you got to call this 800 number and start all over again, and you're like, why did I just spend 25 minutes chatting with this thing, right? So is that do you see that getting better? Is it changing? And any examples you can share of stuff you guys are doing in that space?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest areas of opportunity right now. As I mentioned, there's so much technology, so many different platforms out there that we've been able to integrate into that broader customer journey. And from my perspective, how I like to work with my clients is we really do focus it on the customer. And we start with that journey and we look at the whole life cycle. And yes, today, to your point, Dan, a lot of the solutions do ultimately become point solutions along the way. In fact, we've actually developed, it's not the perfect solution, but it's one that is a wrapper over what could be multiple point solutions to be the glue that holds the whole thing together. And that is one of the ways to solve for that lack of integration today. We see a lot of organizations trying to diversify their services to be able to provide that seamless experience, but it is certainly still a very large area of opportunity.
Yeah. We gotta figure out the magic band of the commercial world, right? That's what I'm gonna think about.
Exactly.
So, you know, Anish, I wanted to bring something up. Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is this is a classic example for the role of standardization. So in any one company, trying to build the wrapper is a localized, you know, decision. Even if the wrapper is great technology, as Erica described, the fact is I have to manually connect sort of proprietary tools that don't have the common language. So a lot of what we're hoping, and I spend a lot of my time in healthcare on this issue, is let's all agree, even if you're vendor A, B, C, D, or E, and you sell products, you know, 1 through 20, that on these key elements, we're going to have a common language for how that information gets handed off. So in the government, when you call the, you know, hey, I saw a pothole on my street at the corner of 3rd and whatever, you could take a picture of it and text it in. You could talk about it over the phone. There are now these open 311 data standards so that even if there's 1,000 vendors that offer products in this place, there's some basic standardization so that you know what goes in, what comes out, so you can more easily plug and play and install those wrappers. So there is sometimes a role of collaboration, in some cases government, to help bring about that kind of magic band-like app that we want. Is sort of competitive private sector, but it's powered by the ability to plug and play into these source systems that are competitive and the like. So fingers crossed, we'll see more standardization in key sectors of the economy to unleash this CX vision that we've been talking about this hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
and actually that's a good.
I think.
Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add to that because that's where I actually think the public sector can really help to drive that, and the open APIs that Anish was referencing in order to provide that standardization that's needed to be able to provide that sort of integrated, seamless experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You made me think, Anish. You had referenced this sort of A/B test that happened with the healthcare.gov project. So many of the members that I speak to, the end client members that I speak to, end up in this, and it's the age-old technology issue, right? Of how do I do I continue to band-aid legacy systems together because I've already made the investments in time, money, resources, right? Versus cutting my losses and jumping to a newer, more modern system that actually solves my problems. Any advice based on that project to people listening here who are kind of at the crux of that decision? I think many of them are, as to how long to keep investing in the old versus just jumping ship to the new.
Yeah, no, it is not easy, and it's going to be situation specific, but I can tell you the option of fielding both teams and then bringing them together to see where the progress is made feels like a short-term hit on the cost side, because you've basically got double the investment, but you may result in a much better outcome because you feel uncomfortable making a big decision to cut bait. By the way, when we did the immigration 90-day project, we were in the middle of $1 billion massive systems integrator modernization of the immigration system. And the very first deliverable that the public would touch and feel was like 3 years after the signing of the contract, right? And here we had 90 days to make a difference. So you get that team A, team B feel. And so, look, to the extent that you can make the underlying data architecture, decouple that from the legacy technology layer, then you can almost liberate that information and fuel apps that can be team A and B without it breaking the bank. What happens today is we couple the technology layer and the data layer, and so we have to make that all in one decision. So I think maybe Dan, the long-winded way of getting to my answer, I would consider fielding both teams, but I would begin with that decoupling of the data layer and then enabling that access to have both teams tap into the same reservoir to do their job.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. So I think we have time for one more question. I want to kind of phrase it to send it to both of you guys as we kind of wrap this here. The question is, where do you see the typical customer on the journey today? So maybe I'll start with you, Erica. Do you see typical clients leveraging AI, AR, automation, blockchain, pieces of it? Where do you see most people when you start talking to them?
Yeah, I think there's a maturity curve there. We're seeing adoption of all of the above. Typically, it starts with automated chatbot or virtual assistant. The example you gave before, when done seamlessly, typically works best for an automated front end to handle the information gathering, can resolve level 1 issues, and then for anything more complicated, we'll hand it off to a person to handle it upstream. And again, ultimately, it's less about the ability to do these things from a technical perspective. It's all about how do you get the issue for the customer resolved, the answer to the question that they're asking, the transaction that they're trying to have processed completed as quick and seamlessly as possible. And that's what everyone is striving towards.
Yep. Amir, how about you? And any technologies you're excited about right now?
Yeah, the enabling infrastructure around the whole issue of APIs, that remains my passion, decoupling the data layer and the tech layer. And that, for those of you in the healthcare industry, where I spend the bulk of my time these days, that will be mandated and regulated. So by this time in the next 12 to 24 months, every health insurance plan, doctor, and hospital will have some API that would allow apps to compete on improved CX so people can better navigate the delivery system. So that's got me pretty excited. And you might look at that as a compliance issue. Maybe not so much they're proactively building this because of the goodness of their heart, but at least we're making the infrastructure investments for the country to help us move on the 5-step journey Erica pointed out.
Great, great. Well, that's about all the time we have. I want to thank our speakers, Anish, Erica. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed this one, and hopefully we answered all your questions. If anybody didn't get one of their questions answered or thinks of one afterwards, please write to us, respond to the follow-up email we'll send you, and we'll make sure we get the answer to you. Thanks for joining us today. Anish and Erica, thanks again, and thanks to the team at Conduent for helping us present today's webinar. Have a great day, everybody. Bye now.
Thanks so much.